Hello, this is the reflection for the 9th of February from Salisbury Cathedral, and I'm Edward Probert, the Canon Chancellor here. Welcome to my study. I'm going to draw to your attention a rather interesting coincidence which I spotted this very morning. The conjunction between a book review I read today about a defunct cultural practice and the very urgent matters of modern, in fact this very day's politics. So I'm going to take those two things apart first so that you get them in their separateness before I put them together, as indeed I did. This morning I came across a book review the book was by someone called Joseph Farrell. It's about the culture of duelling. The title of the book is The Honour and the Sword. It's the kind of book I would probably find quite interesting, which is why I read the review. It's a book which addresses an aspect of human behaviour which was quite common in the history of this and several other societies until relatively recently. A couple of hundred years ago, certainly, it was still current enough, but has now more or less completely disappeared. To quote the reviewer, the review was by someone called Tim Parks, by the way. For 500 years, men of a certain rank settled disputes with sword or pistol in accordance with an elaborate etiquette involving a formal challenge, the appointment of seconds, and the negotiation of a time and a place for a contest governed by strict rules. The angry brawl was drained of passion, made mindful, and even elegant. A doctor was always on hand, but deaths were common. Then, in the second half of the 19th century, the practice declined and disappeared. Now, it's worth noting that this wasn't a fringe activity. Two of the great British statesmen of the early 19th century, both of them Tories, both of them at the time of the event in the cabinet, fought a duel on Putney Heath in London, or just outside London then, on the 21st of September 1809. They were George Canning, the Foreign Secretary, and Viscount Castlereagh, who was the Minister for War. And this was, of course, during the desperate and extended years when Britain and many other nations were fighting the ghastly and extended wars against the France of Napoleon Bonaparte. They'd fallen out over the political intrigues of George Canning. Castlereagh felt that those intrigues were undermining the policy of the government. They fought their duel. The duel, of course, I should point out, was in this country, as in most others, illegal. Both were hit by the bullet coming from the other man. The one that hit Castlereagh bounced off the metal button on his bodily apparel, so he was lucky it bounced off where it might easily have killed him. Canning was hit in the thigh, and the pellet, the ball, was embedded in his leg. Thereafter, the honour between them was satisfied, and they went back to their former duties as colleagues for the next couple of decades. Well, that's British politics at the highest level in time of war in Europe in 1809. Fast forward to the Today programme on BBC Radio for this very day, 9th of February 2022, where it was leading with one of the stories, which was an interview with a gentleman called John Armitage, who over the years apparently has donated some £3 million and more to the Conservative Party. He was lamenting our current circumstances in politics. He expressed worry about the loss of moral authority by politicians, and when they lost it, still staying in their posts. Now, I was intrigued by what he said, and I went back a few hours later to check exactly what I recalled. And so I can able, having heard it again, to quote him precisely. This was a sentence he said: "I find the lack of honour inherent in modern politics incredibly distressing." Well, 200 years ago, such a barely veiled description of the Prime Minister as lacking honour would easily have led to a potentially fatal duel. Now, I'm very glad that this is not so now. For all that people customarily bemoan the moral state of our nation and our society, we should, I think, at least be grateful that our social norms nowadays don't endorse this kind of murderous ritual. But honour, a commodity of such life and death importance, now reduced to an archaism, the kind of word which is so little used that it jumped out of the radio at me as I was shaving this morning, and I could remember it well enough to go back and check a few hours later that I'd heard it used, and that's my recollection was accurate. And it was echoed for me by then reading that article, the book review. I don't think I've ever come across in two such diverse, separated environments, other than their connection with politics in both cases, the word honour. It's just not a word much in current use. Our governing structures in this country are inherited from former times. We have a system in which the person who is the final arbiter of the ministerial code is himself a minister, and therefore his own judge. It's a system which is symptomatic of an era when one would rather die than be accused of dishonour. Such structures may well not be very well fitted for our own society of this day and age. Thank you for listening. Goodbye.